Today we're talking all about how to practice. Welcome back. Welcome to the studio. My name is Cassie and I'm a professional violist and teaching artist. So one of the questions that I go over and debate with other teachers and students alike is how to practice. What's the best, most effective method for practice? So today we're going to talk about a few of those. This is by no means a comprehensive list. I just wanted to give you some ideas in case you were struggling on your own with how to practice. So first things first, we need to make sure that we have a really comfortable practice space. If you haven't watched my video on that, I'll link it up here. And I'd suggest checking that out first, because if we don't have a comfortable practice space, it doesn't really matter what we do in it, we're not going to get the most out of our practice session. So once we've got your practice space all set up, my next recommendation is that you tune really carefully. Whatever your instrument, find a really great tuner that you love. I recommend Tonal Energy Tuner, which I'll have linked down below. And I really like this because it's got everything in it. It's got a tuner, it's got a drone, you can record yourself in it. It's kind of like a one-stop shop. So I really like this tuner. I've used it for a couple of years now and I find it's very useful. So now that you've got your instrument all tuned, the next thing that we're going to do is our warm-up. Now every instrument has their own warm-ups that they like to do, but I always recommend starting with a scale in the piece that you're playing. So for instance, if the piece that you're working on is in G major, you would warm up with a G major scale. There's several ways that you can play your scale as well. You can use it with a tuner, you can use it with a drone. There's another really great YouTube video that's got cello drone, so they just drone a fifth, and that really helps us tuning, especially if we're tuning major scale or a minor scale. Those thirds and how they sit compared to a fifth is different than if we're just droning one note. So I'll link the videos for the cello drones below too. I use these in my orchestra classroom and I use them in my own personal practice. After you've done your scale warm-up, you might want to warm up on some vibrato or some shifting if you're a string player exercises. If you're looking for a vibrato warm-up video, I'll post the one that I made down below, and this is just 2 basic exercises that you can do to warm up your hand if you're new to vibrato, or even if you've been doing vibrato for a while and you just want some new ideas on how to practice that. So that after you've done your warm-ups on vibrato or shifting or whatever you need to do to feel like you're ready to go, now's the time to pull out your repertoire. Your repertoire might even include etudes that you're working on, and etude is really just a French word meaning study. So we're studying one particular aspect of playing. So for violists, a lot of times we use the Kreutzer etudes that have been transcribed for us, or Campagnoli, or there's so many etudes out there that are really great. So if you're struggling with one particular technique aspect, could you put a comment below, like I'm struggling with shifting or I'm struggling with vibrato? And I can recommend a really great etude for you that's probably on an IMSLP, which is a free website, so it'll be no charge to you to find that music. After you've done your etude and you feel like you're settled and you're ready to go, you're going to pull out your repertoire, which is either your solo repertoire or your orchestral repertoire. For your solo repertoire, I really recommend finding a great recording that you love and listening to that. It can either be in your practice session or while you're out walking around, driving in the car, but listening really helps give us creative ideas or interpretative ideas. And don't just find one recording that you really love, because then you kind of get stuck in that mindset of, oh, I have to play it just like this. There's so many ways to interpret music, so find a couple recordings that you really enjoy. YouTube's a really great resource for that. Spotify, there's so many great resources out there for listening to music these days. So find a few recordings that you really enjoy and just put those on repeat. Listen to them, once, twice a week in your practice session, outside of your practice session. And one thing that I really love to do is to put my recording on my earphones and play along with the recording. I find this is really great if the song that I'm working on has accompaniment, because then I get to play with an accompanist and not have to worry about finding somebody that already knows the music or is willing to learn it. After you've listened to your piece and you're ready to get down to it to practicing, I'm going to recommend that you excerpt your piece. So while it is really fun to play the things that we know well, that's not really practicing, that's playing through. So I want you to find the hardest sections in your piece, or the sections in your piece that you struggle with or constantly make mistakes on, and I want you to draw brackets. So you're going to really take your pencil out, draw your brackets around that section, and we're just going to practice those 2 or 3 measures. We're going to take them very slowly and pick apart what exactly is the issue. Once we've identified the issue, and it could be several issues, we're going to tackle those one at a time. If you give your brain too many things to focus on at once, you're not going to have an effective practice session. Especially for string players, we have the option of playing things with alternate fingering. So if you've been doing a passage with one fingering, let's say you've been doing it in first position and maybe you've not tried experimenting in second or third position, see if that can alleviate one of those difficult passages by just changing the fingering pattern. After you've excerpted those measures and you're feeling a little bit better about them, more confident, what we're going to do is add the measure before and the measure after the excerpt. So we're taking that small little portion of our piece and then we're going to slowly put it back into context. Another thing that you can do while you're excerpting your piece is to work on different aspects of string playing separately. For instance, I could do just my left hand only, so I'm not going to bow anything, but I would put my fingers down on the strings that they would go down on if I was playing with my bow. Conversely, I can do just open strings with my bow. So I'm going to play on the strings that I would play on if my fingers were down. Now, when I do this, I like to keep track by playing on the top of the instrument. So my fingers are going on the top of the instrument, but my bow is just doing open strings. The next thing you can do is you can take the bow out of it completely and just pluck through it. I know a lot of times we start as beginners plucking before we get used to the bow, and then we just kind of forget that plucking is an option for us. So if you're really struggling with a passage, that might be one way that you can work on it without having to worry about the aspects of the bow. As you continue delving into that one little passage that you're working on, I'm going to encourage you to work on your expression. So expression comes from the left hand and the right hand. Now really the bow is what makes the sound. There's 3 factors that go into any sound that we make with our bow. There's speed, weight, and placement. So the speed of the bow is obviously how fast you draw it across the strings. The weight is how much arm weight you stick into the string. And then the placement is it closer to the fingerboard or closer to the bridge? All 3 of these factors can be changed, can be combined in a different way, which will get you a different sound. So experimenting with that as you're working on your excerpt can be really helpful in finalizing what your interpretation is. The left hand does contribute to our sound as well. It contributes to the timbre or the tone color that we're creating. So I could choose to use a faster vibrato, a slower vibrato. I could play my notes in a different position. If I'm in first position, that's usually a brighter sound, as opposed to if I'm in third position, fourth position, or a covered position, that's usually a darker sound. So if what you're playing is, it's not quite what you had in your head, try a different position, try a different vibrato speed, and then combine that with those different speed, weight, and placement factors with your bow, and you have a world of different sounds that you can create. Obviously, as we're experimenting on all of this stuff, we need to be aware of what the composer has written on the page. So if the composer wants you to play a certain passage piano, but you're really feeling it as a forte, that might be something that you need to reconsider, because we do want to honor what the composer has written. They've taken their time to add bowings, add dynamics, add articulations, and we really should do our best to honor those. So we've talked through a couple of different ways that you could practice, and I'm also going to recommend these wonderful books. We've got Basics by Simon Fisher and Practice by Simon Fisher. Now, these books are geared more towards violinists, but as you can see, they're pretty thick. There's hundreds of pages of suggestions for how to practice a certain passage if you're struggling. And yes, I know it's for violinists, but a lot of what's in here translates to us because we are an upper string. So cellists and bassists, you can feel free to check these books out as well. And I will post a link to these down below if you'd like to purchase them or check them out. But they really are invaluable resources for us on how to pick apart bowings or articulations or dynamics, etc. There's literally hundreds of suggestions in here that will help you get started. The last thing I'm going to recommend is that you purchase a practice journal, and I've linked down below one that I've used before that I found very helpful. If you're kind of a scatterbrained, disorganized person, having a practice journal can really help you keep on track. It can also show you your progress. If you feel like I do oftentimes, you step into the practice room and you're not sure if you're actually making progress or not. If you've written down what you're doing, it doesn't have to be very detailed, but even just a general idea, I'm going to work on this Mozart piece from measure 1 through 20, and my goal is to fill in the blank. I want to play the perfect articulation, or I want to get the dynamics right. Whatever your goal for that day is, be specific. When you have those really specific goals, it can help you feel like you're making progress more quickly. So those are my basic recommendations for how to practice. Obviously, it's not an overview of every single way that you can practice. It's just some suggestions to get you started if you're struggling. If you've got some ways that you practice that you found really, really successful, would you mind posting those in the comments below so that the group or all of the fellow violists, violinists, string players can share from your knowledge? As always, thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope you are inspired to go back into the practice room, renewed with some new ideas, and I will see you in the next video. Happy practicing.